I found the beginning of the book to be a bit of a drag. It just wouldn't get to the good part because at the beginning, I just really think that the author did a marvelous job of portraying this heaviness. And it really made me think of my parents, honestly. Like, I've heard their stories of the war. Hi, my loves. Let's talk about Alchemized and whether it's actually worth all the hype. So, if you don't know Alchemized, if you've been living under a rock, that is, then you might not know that it was originally a fan fiction written by the author Senlin Yu on Archive of Our Own. And it was basically just a story combining Harry Potter with The Handmaid's Tale and where Hermione and Draco are actually endgame. But then the story got so much traction and so much momentum that the author was actually given a book deal. And she was told to turn the fan fiction into an actual story that was not copyright infringement, and it became Alchemized, after previously being called Manacled. I haven't personally read Manacled, but after hearing all of the hype about Alchemized, I decided that I actually have to see what this book is all about. And if you don't know the story, it's a post-war dark fantasy with a subplot of romance. It's not a romantasy, so if you go into this expecting romance and cute lovey-dovey moments, then you're gonna be disappointed because it's a dark fantasy set in a post-war world. And the plot follows Helena Marino, who is a healer who is captured by the enemy forces, or like the dark forces who have won the war. And she wakes up in a post-war world with no memories. So she is taken to the house of the High Reeve, who is like the second highest power in the enemy forces, in order for her memories to be retracted or regained, because they all have magic, and he has a magic that allows him to be able to uncover her lost memories. And this is the premise of the book. I won't go into details so I don't spoil it for you, but what I will say is that I actually loved this book. It was so dark and so gothic, but so realistic in the ways that it explores trauma and war and grief and rage, and the ways in which war and pain destroy a person and turn him or her into a shell of their previous selves. The book was so well written, and the author's style is so beautiful. It's so melancholic, but in such a captivating way. It really shatters your heart, but in the best way possible. I have to say that I found the beginning of the book to be a bit of a drag. It just wouldn't get to the good part because at the beginning, the author is really just building the world and explaining the magic system and telling us all of the backstory and the history of the world before the war and etc. That it feels like an info dump. It feels like you're just being bombarded with these pieces of information that don't really make sense to you at the beginning because you don't really know who these people are or what's going on. And so it just feels like an intense amount of info dumping, and it kind of loses you. I was kind of bored, I'm not gonna lie. I had to push myself through the beginning, through like 150 pages before it actually started to pick up, which is a lot to ask a reader to get through. 150 pages is like half of a 300-page book. That's a lot. But because the book is like 1,000 pages, it seems kind of small in comparison. But it did feel like a drag at the beginning, and I had to push myself through because I was hearing all of this hype and this buzz around this book, and I wanted to see whether it was actually worth it. And it was actually worth it. So I would recommend pushing through and getting through the beginning stages of the book because it's actually really good once you get into it. And what I would recommend doing actually, and what I did, but I was unemployed at the time, so maybe you won't have the time to do this, but if you do have the time, I would recommend reading part 1, reading part 2, and then after finishing part 2, go back and read part 1. Just trust me, it will give you a whole new experience of the book, because after having the background context and the information that part 2 gives you, reading part 1 feels like a whole different experience because you notice all of the little details and hints and clues that the author leaves in part 1 that you previously miss when you start the book fresh, because you have no idea and everything is new and information is being dumped on you, and so you miss these tiny little nuances that are thrown around that add so much to the story and help you to get through the book and to reach part 3. you don't have to reread part 2 itself. You just need to reread part 1 and then you can move on to part 3. But if you don't want to do that, that's also fine. Now, I have to say that as much as I love the two main characters, Helena and Kane, I'm obsessed with them because they are so well written and their trauma is so well portrayed. Like, they're fucked up, but you get it because you can see what they're going through throughout the entire book, and so you're not shocked by all of the twisted ways that their psyches function. However, I have to say that I was not particularly connected to the other characters like Luke and Leela and all of the others, the members of the resistance. So Helena serves as a healer in the resistance. And so she feels this intense connection to her lifelong friends, you know, and a duty to save everyone on the resistance side, which are the good guys technically. So I get it. This intense feeling that she has to save everyone and save the world and serve the resistance. But she feels this dilemma because she also loves her enemy technically. And so she's always debating whether to focus on her love for Kane or to save everyone. And while theoretically, I get why she would prioritize saving everyone and the resistance. But in the book, practically, I was like, girl, just choose Kane because these people are not worth it. Like, I don't know if it was the author not really knowing how to get us to really love Luke and Leela and the other characters, like her best friends in the resistance. Maybe they weren't that well written, or maybe we didn't get that much time with them to really connect to them. I don't know. I just really didn't get the dilemma. For me, it was like, just go get it, girl. Go and follow your heart because the resistance is not worth it. Now, I'm not gonna go too much into detail about the characters and the plot and all of that because I'm sure there are many other book reviews on here and on Instagram and TikTok that can give you that information. What I really want to talk about, and that I found a bit interesting, but in a sad way, is people's reactions to this book. Because before going into this book, I expected to be traumatized. I expected to read the most horrifying book I have ever read because people were so shocked by everything that went on in this book, and like, it's so dark, and people were crying for like months on end. And while I get it. I get that it's so heavy and it's so sad and it's so dark. It is. It's just, it made me realize that people in the Western world mainly have no real experience with trauma and war. And I don't mean to undermine anyone's experience with trauma and their pain, but it just made me realize that as a culture, they haven't really come into contact with war and living in perilous times. Because as a Middle Eastern woman, a Lebanese woman who was born and raised in a post-war country, this book was not that shocking to me, and it made me sad because what do you mean this is the reality for most of my parents' generation? What do you mean that they had to live through things like this and this was their life? And people on the other side of the world are so shocked by this book because they think that it's so outlandish. These things exist, these things happen, and the fact that you're so shocked by a book, a part of me is happy for them that they haven't lived through this. I really am happy for them, but another side of me is like sad that they're so out of touch with reality and the world that they don't know that things like this happen. Sure, there's no magic and there's no necromancy and like, fine, that doesn't exist, but the actual terror of it and the horror and the things that are committed, minus the magic, these things happen every day in the world. And like, you're outraged by things that happen in a book, but you're so disconnected from reality that you don't see them happening in the world. It just made me really sad seeing all of the outrage on this book and like the trauma everyone was experiencing reading it. But I have to say that the author did a really good job of portraying war and trauma and this fear of losing your loved ones every single day under bombs or from famine. And I just really think that the author did a marvelous job of portraying this heaviness. And it really made me think of my parents, honestly. Like, I've heard their stories of the war, the Lebanese civil war. I've heard them all, and it just didn't come close to reading about a young couple living through a war and the fear they felt, and it just really made me picture them as like my actual parents, and it made me sad, and it gave me empathy for my parents and their weird quirks and all of their fucked up ways. But now I get it. I get the trauma that they lived through, because like the author really did a good job showing how war changes you, how it really just destroys you bit by bit until there's not much left of you except the weird coping mechanisms you picked up, the survival mechanisms you picked up during the war. And after the war is over, you don't really recognize yourself anymore. And this was the experience of these characters. Like, they survived the war, but at what cost? And like, they still had each other, but they weren't the same people after the war. And it was just really a beautiful portrayal of love in the time of war. How love is not always this cute, romantic butterflies feeling. It's fear, and it's clinging on to the person you love because you never know if you're gonna see them again tomorrow. And it's heavy, and it doesn't really feel good, but it's the only piece of comfort that you have during war. And yeah, it was just a really good book. And I really hope that people can read this book and just keep in mind that these things happen in the world. It's not just some fantasy book that is really unrealistic and only happens in a fictional world. It happens every day. It's happening right now as you watch this video, and it will continue on happening. But I feel like if we don't talk about these things, then they will stay fictional things. And these issues just really deserve to be exposed and talked about and made more accessible, like this book has done. And I just really recommend that you read this book. It's very heavy, it's very sad, but it's beautiful, and it will give you some empathy for all of the people around the world right now who are living through war and who are losing their loved ones in war. And just, while I pray that you will never have to go through a war and lose anyone and feel this terror of the unknown, what tomorrow might bring, I really pray that you're safe from it. And I still really wish that more people would be educated and just informed on what it's actually like to live in a different culture that has been destroyed by war. And yeah, I'll see you for the next video. Bye.